Did you know that according to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, 2/3 of all our fruits and veggies eaten in the United States come from outside the country? And there are all kinds of problems with that. For one, an apple that had to travel hundreds or even thousands of miles to get to your plate can't be all that fresh or nutritious. And I say that's just crazy, especially when we can grow so many different varieties in our own front and backyards. Jumping into growing your own food is actually quite simple. You just need to know the rules. My free webinar, Introduction to Urban Farming, begins to frame out your pathway to growing your own healthy food. In this free webinar, you'll learn the 3 simple steps to becoming an urban farmer, the 5 components of healthy soil, and how to think regeneratively, which is, by the way, one of the most important concepts we need to be exploring right now. Will you join me in this webinar and help co-create the food revolution? Just text GARDEN to 44222 or go to urbanfarmu.org to sign up for your free webinar. That's GARDEN to 44222 or urbanfarmu.org.
You're listening to the Urban Farm Podcast, your partner in the Grow Your Own Food revolution. Whether you've just been introduced to urban farming or you're a lifelong advocate, we're sure you'll leave feeling more informed, equipped, and empowered to dig deeper into the soil of your local food economy. With you every step of the way, here's your host, Greg Peterson.
Today on the Urban Farm Podcast, we have Peter Burke of the Daily Gardener to talk about indoor salad gardening. Peter is the author of Year-Round Indoor Salad Gardening. He has been teaching gardening classes since 2006 when he started presenting workshops on indoor salad gardening, square foot gardening, extending the season garden, and many more. He also started the dailygardener.com to support the need for specialized seeds for indoor salad gardening. Peter lives and gardens in Calais, Vermont with his family. Welcome to the show today, Peter.
Thanks, Greg, and thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Great website. I've been looking at it, and it's really like what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. So I shared a bit about you. Can you fill in the blanks for us and share more about the path you took to where you're at now?
Sure. Yeah. Actually, I started organic gardening when I was 17 years old, when it was still the Organic Farming and Gardening magazine. Mm-hmm. And I've been gardening ever since, and I would say gardening up here in the north, it happens that right about the time the geese are flying overhead, you get that feeling like, oh, it's all over, you know. And one of the things that I couldn't freeze or dry or can or store in some way in my cold cellar or pickle is fresh greens. Mm-hmm. So around 2005 in that winter, I said, well, I've got to figure this out. And I started, with all the different ways you can grow greens, like growing sprouts in jars, like alfalfa and mung beans. I tried hydroponics. I tried growing lettuces under lights. And I tried working with the greenhouse. And each one of them had their own particular problems. I work a full-time job. And in fact, I work a 50, 60-hour-a-week job. So
understand that one.
Yeah, right. So I don't really have time to do 3 washings for the sprouts or to watch over a greenhouse. Or so I, after trying all those things, I just on a whim tried growing the sunflower greens. Mm-hmm. And I had grown them before years ago, and I grew, of course, a great big tray of them, and it was sort of a feast or famine, and it was hard to find a place to put the tray. And I tried to grow it in a smaller, and I happen to have a bunch of the half-loaf bread pans, the 3-inch.
Oh, yes, right. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and so I thought, well, I'll just try these, and at the same time I tried the peas because I had read about pea shoots. What I found was that just by growing a small amount on a day or every other day basis, it didn't take up much room in my kitchen. It didn't take up much room in a windowsill, but I could keep a fresh salad going so that every day I could harvest a fresh salad. And that was, that just did so many things. Number one, it didn't take up much room. Number two, I didn't need any lights. I could grow it in the ambient light, and it didn't matter whether it was a southern window or a northern window. It worked just as well. And at that point, I added radishes, and then I added buckwheat, and I kind of had my basis of a really nice mixed salad, nice, tossed salad looking. And I've got 3 boys, and they're at home, and they were my best critics. If they look at a bowl of alfalfa greens and say, "Dad, this isn't salad. You can add it to a salad if you want.
Right.
Just don't try to make me eat this like it's a salad." So when I came up with these other greens, the combination of those 4, the sunflower, the peas, the radishes, and the buckwheat, they loved it. They just said, "Oh, this is good salad." And so I knew that I had found something that worked well, not just in the logistics of it, but also in the in the gourmet part. And the kids like it too.
Right.
Mikey likes it, so. And so I went from there to actually, we have a local co-op, and they do outreach for the community. And I asked them, well, would it be okay if I try to teach this as a class? Because I really knew that that's the way I would learn, is having other people do it and try it.
Exactly.
And that was so informative, and it was so much fun because people were very excited about it. And so from there, that's what started me thinking about writing a book about it. So that's how we went from the first sprouts to, and I call them soil sprouts because I'm specifically growing them in soil, not in jars, for a variety of very good reasons, and not the least of which is that they only require a watering once a day.
Oh, right.
And the first 4 days you don't need to do anything.
Yes.
They're just in a dark place.
So your book is by Chelsea Green. It's called Year-Round Indoor Salad Gardening, How to Grow Nutrient-Dense, Soil-Sprouted Greens in Less Than 10 Days.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what makes it so workable, is because of the short growing period.
Right.
And and the techniques that I use to plant and to start them makes for that short growing season. No matter what else you grow, whether it's microgreens or whatever,
right.
That's just an unbeatable combination. No lights, and you don't really need to have high temperatures. I like to say that my greenhouse is my house full of greens.
Oh yes, yeah, perfect. Well, I want to read this quote that I found online. I think you said you wrote this. Year-round indoor salad gardening offers good news. With nothing more than a cupboard and a windowsill, you can grow all the fresh salad greens you need for the winter months or throughout the entire year with no lights, no pumps, and no greenhouse. Tell me more about that. That's fascinating.
News, isn't it?
Yeah, that's really good news.
Well, I recently was doing a home show, and one of the things that was a challenge for me is that you're in those big warehouses and there's no way to really show a window. So I got to thinking, well, how little space can I fit this into? Because I really want a visual, and I ended up building a very small cabinet. It's 20 inches wide and 28 by 72 inches tall, 6 foot tall. And there's 4 shelves, and then there's 3 little shelves in the bottom where I have 2 doors to close it up for the dark. And that is all the space you need to grow just about 12 to 14 ounces of fresh greens every single day.
Every day?
You can actually, every day, yeah. And just by, you plant them and put them in the dark cupboard to start with. And then after 4 days, they're up about an inch. and it might be 5 days depending on how warm or cool it is. You put them up on a shelf, and then you replace those ones you took out with a new batch. And so that way you're just growing a little bit on a daily or every other day basis. And so it doesn't take a lot of time, in a busy schedule. It doesn't require much in the way of materials. I have 2 boxes that I use that I call my tools, my most important tools. One's a seed box and one's my soil box.
Right.
Okay, and the soil box, of course, is moist and dirty and all the rest, and my seed box is nice and clean, and, there's no moisture. I never put anything in there that's at least wet, just to keep the viability of the seeds. So with those 2 boxes, I can move my whole garden operation into the kitchen and out of it if need be. Every once in a while, I'll leave them under the table until my wife notices, But then they go back out up to my office. But anyway, that makes it a really easy thing to work into a small house or an apartment, or even if you've got a big homestead kitchen, there's always, the space is limited. I just like to emphasize that it's not really a toy garden. This isn't just, if you were to extrapolate this into a yield per acre, which is sort of a farming standard.
Exactly.
You would grow roughly, and this is a low estimate, 2,300,000 pounds of fresh greens per acre. So,
whoa, that's a low estimate?
That's a low estimate. And because, some things that I grow, and I recently added broccoli, and because of the nutritional benefits of the broccoli are so well documented by the Johns Hopkins University.
Yes.
And I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's really astonishing how, that it's been scientifically, researched into this antioxidant called sulforaphane actually kills cancer cells, and they're and it has 20 to 50 times the amount of sulforaphane by weight.
Broccoli does.
Broccoli sprouts, yeah. And in the book Superfoods, there's a sidebar that says the superfood. It says, broccoli sprouts have this, 20 to 50 times. So that 1 ounce, even though you don't grow an awful lot in that little tray, that 1 ounce is a really a nutritional powerhouse. It's really important. So I think it's worth it for the space and the time to grow them.
So let's start from the beginning. So you already mentioned you have seeds, and I want to talk to you. Well, let's go there. Where do you get the seeds from?
Well, there are a lot of places online. There's a couple, you probably know about Johnny's Seeds in Maine, and then High Mowing Seeds here in Vermont, where I am. And then there's a Handy Pantry out on the West Coast. And if you're in Canada, it's Mum's Sprouts, MUMM. And so there's a lot of reliable places, but I found that for my classes and to sort of make sure that I had the best that I could find, I went shopping to different organic farms, and I get one from Nebraska and some from Vermont and just wherever, and I'll buy 50 or 100 pounds of each seed.
Yeah.
So I offer those on my website, The Daily Gardener.
Oh, very good.
And I bag them up in quantities that work well for what we're doing, and I bag them up in a 2-month supply, and it's about a 3.5-4 cup bag of seeds, and that's the sunflower, the radishes, the buckwheat, and the peas. And these are all ones that I trial, of course, before I send them out, and I know that they're good. And but anyway, there's a lot of sources, and it's just if you're thinking about buying a quantity, make sure you buy a little first,
exactly,
and then buy the quantity, because from all those places that I bought from, sometimes the daikon isn't really as good as it should be, or so you do have to use a little bit of caution when buying seeds. Anything you buy from me, I've tested, and I know it's perfect. So.
Great. So seeds. Pans to grow it in. What do you use for that?
I use a variety of things, but what I use in my classes is the 6-inch by 3-inch half-loaf bread pan, and it's 2 inches deep, and that's a good place to learn. It's a good place to start just to learn. If for my garden at home, generally I'll use, I like ceramic bowls. I use sometimes actually a stainless steel bread pan. Those are really nice. And then I have some cedar boxes that I made that are, the right to size. And so I just to try different materials that I think are more natural and and certainly more reusable.
Right.
The bread pans, they'll last for about 10 plantings and then they start to crinkle and crackle.
Yes.
So there's no holes in any of these pans, so you can use just a regular cereal bowl. You don't need to worry about drainage or anything like that.
Right. Perfect. So we got the pans, we got the seeds, the soil. What do you do for soil?
The soil is a standard germination mix. It's what a gardener might call a soilless mix. It's peat moss, vermiculite, perlite.
Perfect.
And you can get this anywhere by the bale or by the 20-quart bag. And the only thing you have to watch is you don't want anything like a hydrogel or something that's something that's put in there to hold moisture for a potted plant, which might be fine, but isn't really appropriate for food.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Perfect. So then we have the pan. We've got the soil in the pan. Just sprinkle the seeds on top and go.
Yeah. Well, the process is first you got to soak those seeds. Remember, we're time is of the essence here, so we want to make sure that we give them a boost. We'll save 2, 3, 4 days by actually soaking those seeds, and I'll soak them for anywhere from 6 up to 24 hours. And it's good to know that you have that kind of leeway because, we're all busy and you soak them for 6 hours and by God, you can't get to them until the next morning or maybe even the next evening. If it's going to be more than 24 hours, well, don't worry. You can pour the water off and let them actually start to sprout in the cup that you're going and still plant them and still come up with a good harvest. And I like to emphasize my motto is that you just can't mess this up. You can do all kinds of things wrong and still come up with a great crop. And I love to tell a story about my son, Jake, who has helped me with this over the years. He dropped one of the pans of peas once, and it was one of the 4x8, one of the big pans. And, being a good kid, he went and got the dustpan and swept it up into the dustpan. But being a kid, right, he left the dustpan sitting behind the wood stove and totally forgotten. 4 days later, lo and behold, I go back. There are the peas actually growing up out of the dustpan, and looking hale and hearty. So I'm telling you, you can throw these things on the floors and grow them in a dustpan. If that's how you just can't mess it up.
Perfect. So now fast forward 4 days, and you have this beautiful pan or pans full of salad. What do you do?
Well, what they look like at that point is that they're completely yellow. What we're doing is what you would call forcing. We're growing them in the dark. We're encouraging to put up a long spindly stem. Right. And this is, of course, completely opposite of what you do for your regular garden.
Yeah, exactly.
And I call it, if your friends tell you you're doing everything wrong, just tell them, yes, I am, and then serve them a salad in January. So anyway, the neat thing is that at that point they should be up about 3/4 an inch or so, and they actually, after I put the moistened seeds on top of the soil, I don't bury them, I don't put soil on top of them all, I put a piece of wet newspaper right on top of them.
Oh, right.
Okay, and that serves as the soil over the top. What that does is it keeps keeps the seeds moist and warm, and it also keeps them a lot cleaner. So those 4 days is really the key to having a fast-growing crop. Because when you bring them out, after those 4 days, and you put them on the windowsill, And then you start to water once a day. You haven't had to water all 4 days, any of the first 4 days. But then you start to water once a day, and they green up in, 3 to 6 days. It all depends on how big you want them and how desperate you are. But, the things like the peas and the radishes come up very quickly, and they're something you can harvest any old time.
Right.
The sunflower had the hulls, and I like to wait until that seed leaf actually opens up and drops the hull for me. Same thing with the buckwheat. That has a very tight, sort of triangular-looking seed hull, and it's not until those leaves actually sort of open up that those drop off. So you only have to pick off a couple of the hulls.
Right. So then 4 or 5 days later, you're harvesting?
Yep.
Just cut them off and drop them in a bowl?
Yep. Yeah. I rinse them, with fresh water. I always rinse them. They're pretty easy to clean. It doesn't require if you've done sprouts in a jar, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That job of getting the hulls off can be a long one and uses up a lot of water. These you basically are just going to rinse with fresh water. Then you just chop them up, and I always chop them up on the stem end about a 1/4 inch, and then as I get up towards the greens and more like an inch or so. But the sunflowers, you actually just take a handful of them and throw them in a sandwich and eat it.
Oh, nice, right.
And the same thing with the buckwheat. The peas, you want to chop up.
And these got to be just jam-packed with micronutrients.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's the science of it is except for the broccoli, nothing really has been that well researched. So it's hard to make a claim about whether it's better than the regular vegetable pea or the vegetable sunflowers but our experience has been that I think they're jam-packed full of micro all kinds of nutrients.
Yeah.
They call nutrient dense.
Yes, exactly.
And you chop them up, and then you just, make your tossed salad. And, of course, I always like to grate a carrot because during the winter I have lots of those, and that's always great.
Yep.
And but from there, you can add anything you happen to have.
Perfect. So do you have any tips, your favorite tips from the book?
Well, it's sort of like choosing a child, favorite child.
choose away.
One of the things that was fun about writing this book was I got to do something that I always, I love to read, but I tend to be a National Geographic reader where I read the captions and look at the pictures first and decide whether I really want to, read that whole story. So if you go through my book and you read the captions and the pictures from front to back, you basically have the essence. And then to even go a little further, I put right in the center of the book is a quick start guide.
Oh, nice.
So it's just, it's just A to Z. This is what you have to do. And if you want to make a photocopy and put that on your fridge, you've got a reference that you just look and say, oh, okay, now I do this, now I do that. And those are fun things. And then the last thing, of course, is the story. How did I get to where I am? What I'm doing and stuff. So those are fun things about the. But my favorite tip in the book is what I call. It's on the same thing as you can't mess it up.
Right.
And if you forget to water something one day and you come back and the thing is completely wilted, then you can perform sprout CPR. And you just water them and run them under cold water, put them in a plastic bag and put it in the fridge, and they come right back to life.
Right.
They are so hardy. And that's thanks to having the soil, having them grow in soil.
Exactly. All right, I'm going to shift a little bit on you.
Sure, go ahead.
Can you talk about a time you failed and how you may have overcome that failure, what you might have learned from it?
The sprout CPR, of course, is one of them.
Oh,
I would
yes,
like to say,
of course.
It wasn't because I forgot to water something, where in fact I did, and that's really the nice thing about it is you have the leeway to.
Right.
And, in the very beginning, the biggest mistake I made was, of course, growing things in big trays, of having just too much at a time.
Oh.
And what I've come to appreciate with this is the absolute freshness of what you have in that salad bowl, because there's nothing. I mean, there is no green that you can get that's as fresh as this, other than what you pick out of your own garden.
Right.
But, during the winter months up here, you are really, even, and this is no dig on the great farmers that we have who bring us fresh greens all winter long, but they are 3 days old or even 3 weeks old, and there is the nutrients in the greens that are 3 or 4 or even 3 weeks old, it diminishes over time.
Right.
There's no way that can be helped. So when you're cutting those greens, chopping them up, putting them in the salad bowl and having them, they are absolutely the most fresh.
And they probably taste like explode in your mouth taste, right?
Absolutely great. Yeah.
So what do you consider your biggest success?
Well, the biggest success for me is that how low tech the whole thing is. More or less, you can do all this. You have all of this abundance, and you don't have to turn on a light switch. You don't have to pump anything.
Right.
You can do this in an apartment. You can do it anywhere that you have a window, and you can grow all of your salad greens, which is, I just think, sort of in the vein of the, of us all becoming agrarians, all farmers. In I think in your website you talk about the eco village, a revolutionary approach, and I think that's the way I feel about this. Is that's the greatest success, is that it really is a revolutionary approach to everyone having a certain amount of food freedom and not being reliant on somebody else, but more importantly, just having the real pleasure of growing your own food. I mean, that's really what got me started, is I just enjoy gardening, and I missed it during the winter. What I fell upon was something that it was just much bigger than I ever expected, much more, it was just like, wow, this is so fantastic, I can't believe it,
Nice.
And that's when I had to teach it and show it, and, I sent it to my friends and said, okay, you have to try this. I want to see if it works for you.
Well, and just a kudos, shout out to you. This is a Chelsea Green book. They published it, and that's a big deal in our realm and what we do. Getting published by Chelsea Green, you must be doing something right.
They're the nicest folks, and I really enjoy working with them. And they make a commitment to you that and my daughter has published a book on her own about Ayurvedic medicine, and I tell her, oh, well, Chelsea Green's helped me with this, and they helped me with that, and and she's like, wow, they're doing that for you. So they're just great people. I mean, they're living the life,
Nice.
And it was fun when I went down there the very first time. I did my workshop and had them all plant a tray, so they could see and feel my enthusiasm for it, and so they really got the bug. I mean, they were just great. Just so much fun.
Sweet. So here's a deep question for you. What drives you? Like, what's your big why?
Well, my hobby, my passion really has been gardening, so all of this is really an extension of that, something that I just really enjoy, and so when I go home and I get to water my plants, it's not a labor, it's just a labor of love. It's something that I just really enjoy. And, I love salads. I love great salads. That really was a lot of fun, and that's why we garden. I mean, there's times when my wife and I sit down to a meal and we just look at each other and shake our head. We couldn't go out and get this.
Right.
You could not go to any restaurant and have this. This is the best, and that's just the real pleasure of gardening is having those moments when you just think, this is better than going out. I'll do the dishes, no problem.
Exactly. You know what I hear in all of this?
Yeah.
I hear peace. You seem very peaceful around all of this, which is
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's a fun thing to do, and it's empowering on one level. But I just have so much real joy in it.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I don't know if you've seen the cover of the book, but it's a picture that my stepdaughter sent me from Prince Edward Island. And she took this up, and because she was up there, it was really hard for her to grow a garden. And she started growing them for her and her husband. And I sent hundreds of pictures to Chelsea Green, and lo and behold, here is the picture from Claudia of her garden up there. And that's the real charming part of it, is just seeing other people actually do this and enjoy it as much as I do.
Yeah. That's always a bonus. So I'm all about education, and I have to know, is there one book that has been influential in this part of your process, obviously besides your book?
Well, long before my book, and I think that, really, it was both the books, The Square Foot Gardening by Mel Bartholomew,
right.
And
Excellent
I read
book.
the one by John Jeeves, the Grow More
Right.
Vegetables book,
Yeah.
which is, both those came out and really introduced to America the French intensive method, and just get you thinking differently about how you garden. That was really great. And when I got Mel Bartholomew's book in 1981, I've just added new beds every year to the point where I have about 50 4x4 beds, and then some,
Wow.
4x8s, and we have a blast. What are we going to do? And as you and I were talking about before, there are successes and there's failures.
Yeah.
There are bugs, and and there are years when I can't grow zucchini. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
Last year I could not grow a zucchini. I mean, that's usually supposed to be the easiest thing to grow.
I know. Isn't that amazing how that happens sometimes?
But, on the other hand, I had more tomatillos than I knew what to do with.
Yeah. Well, at least tomatillos are culturally worth more than zucchinis. You could trade them for a lot of zucchinis.
Yeah, and I make a tomatillo salsa that's just to die for. It's absolutely fantastic.
Nice. Nice.
So those two books really, and of course I do have to thank the Rodale people
Yes.
for their at that time it was organic farming and gardening, and the many books that have come out on gardening
From them.
are just from them and from all the way around.
Right.
So those have been the two books, though. Those ones and that magazine have been the ones that have really been a big influence for me.
Perfect. So do you have one final piece of advice for our listeners?
Oh, do it. Don't hesitate. You cannot mess it up. You will be so surprised at how easy it is to do.
Yeah.
It's.
And if you do mess it up, you can eat it. Right?
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it, yeah. And, they can contact me. It's thedailygardener.com.
Perfect.
That's all, it's all one word. And TD Garden, T as in Thomas, D as in David, garden at AOL.com. And, there's, anyone is really welcome to email me or to get in touch with
Reach
me
out,
through
say
the
hi.
contact form on there.
Well, you have lots of great resources on your website. Can you spend a couple minutes and tell us about the resources you have available for us?
Well, the main thing, of course, is the seeds, and then the photographs of the sprouts, day 1 through day 7. I try to say that because when you first pick up that, paper and you look underneath there, you say, there ain't no way it's going to be ready in 7 days.
Right.
And then the next thing you know, they're up an inch because you've blinked.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
And then they just keep growing, and almost every time that I start it, I sort of think, is this really going to work that well? And, is it really as easy as I say it is? Yeah, it is. It
Right.
really is.
The life of a gardener these days, it's all about experimenting.
And in this case, it worked so well.
Yeah, perfect. So your website is thedailygardener.com.
Yep.
And your email address?
tdgarden@aol.com.
Perfect.
So that's, Thomas David, GARDEN. .com. I mean, at AOL.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us on the show and sharing your experience with us today, Peter. It has been a treat.
Well, it was a pleasure talking to you, Greg, and keep up the good work. It's just so great what you're doing.
Thanks.
My hat's off to you.
Thank you. Well, that's all for today. Thanks for joining us on the Urban Farm Podcast. Interested in learning more and taking control of your food future? Text Urban Farm to 33444 to sign up for our weekly urban farming newsletter. Jam-packed with urban farming tips, stories from people just like you learning to urban farm, and free classes, the Urban Farm Lifestyle Newsletter will equip you to join the urban farming revolution. Text Urban Farm to 33444. Did you know that according to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, 2/3 of all our fruits and veggies eaten in the United States come from outside the country? And there are all kinds of problems with that. For one, an apple that had to travel hundreds or even thousands of miles to get to your plate can't be all that fresh or nutritious. And I say that's just crazy, especially when we can grow so many different varieties in our own front and backyards. Jumping into growing your own food is actually quite simple. You just need to know the rules. My free webinar, Introduction to Urban Farming, begins to frame out your pathway to growing your own healthy food. In this free webinar, you'll learn the 3 simple steps to becoming an urban farmer, the 5 components of healthy soil, and how to think regeneratively, which is, by the way, one of the most important concepts we need to be exploring right now. Will you join me in this webinar and help co-create the food revolution? Just text GARDEN to 44222 or go to urbanfarmu.org to sign up for your free webinar. That's GARDEN to 44222 or urbanfarmu.org.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Urban Farm Podcast. Remember to listen 3 days a week for tips, advice, and resources to help you on your journey with urban farming. You can find us on the web at urbanfarm.org or send us an email to podcast@urbanfarm.org. In the words of Vincent van Gogh, great things are done by a series of small things brought together. Be encouraged that with each lesson learned and skill developed, you are one step closer in the direction of your dreams.